Have you ever loved someone so deeply that it ached in your chest just to imagine a world without them? Not because they left, but because they were never really yours to keep. That kind of love, the one that grips your soul quietly, that burns without a flame, that makes you question your worth and wonder if you're too much or not enough, has haunted poets, warriors, and emperors for centuries. But here's a truth we rarely say out loud. The most painful kind of love is the one where you lose yourself trying to be loved in return. And that's where the ancient Stoics, of all people, step in, not as emotionless statues carved out of reason, but as fierce defenders of something far more powerful. A love rooted in self-mastery, in dignity, in quiet magnetism. This is not a story about seduction. This is not a guide to playing games. This is the story of how Stoic wisdom, born from hardship, forged in silence, can teach you how to build a love so strong, so grounded, so breathtakingly calm, that it doesn't just attract the right person. It keeps them, because let's face it, in a world obsessed with validation, desperate for attention, and addicted to dopamine, love has become less of a connection and more of a competition. Swipe, match, impress, perform. We chase chemistry, but forget character. We crave passion, but forget peace. And what if I told you that the Stoics, the men who lived over 2,000 years ago, men like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, knew exactly what it takes to be not just loved, but irresistibly magnetic, because Stoic love is not loud. It doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it doesn't panic when you take too long to reply. It stands still, rooted in strength, quiet in its certainty. It's the kind of love that pulls you in, not because it needs you, but because it respects itself enough to never need to convince you. And this is where everything changes. When you embrace Stoicism in love, you stop asking, "Do they like me?" and you start asking, "Am I someone I'd fall in love with?" Because here's the hard truth. Attraction isn't about looks, it's about energy. The energy of someone who doesn't flinch when alone, who knows what they bring, who speaks less, but says more, who can sit in silence and still be the loudest presence in the room. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Isn't Stoicism all about repressing emotions? Doesn't it mean being cold, detached, unavailable? No, that's the misunderstanding. Stoicism isn't about not feeling. It's about not being ruled by what you feel. It's about choosing love, not falling blindly into it. It's about knowing the difference between affection and attachment, between desire and dependence, between intensity and instability. Because real love, the kind that lasts, not explodes and burns out, isn't made of chaos. It's made of character, and in a time where people ghost each other without a second thought, where commitment is optional and vulnerability is mocked, there is something wildly magnetic about someone who doesn't play games, someone who doesn't over-explain, over-apologize, or overreach, someone who stays grounded. That's the Stoic way, And I'll be honest with you, learning this wasn't easy. I've loved people who didn't love me back. I've begged for texts, waited for calls, made excuses for their silence. I've questioned my worth in the absence of their attention. I've tried to be funnier, smarter, more chill, and the worst part, it worked, temporarily, until it didn't. Because when love is earned through performance, it becomes a stage you're terrified to step off. You become addicted to applause instead of connection. That's when I found Stoicism. Not in a book, not in a quote, but in the silence after being left behind. It taught me to ask, what if love isn't about being chosen? What if it's about choosing yourself so fiercely and completely that anyone who doesn't align with your peace quietly removes themselves? That's the magnetism Stoicism offers, not the kind that pulls through manipulation, but the kind that draws through truth. Because here's the core principle: you attract what you are, not what you want. You want respect. Be someone who doesn't betray themselves for approval. You want passion. Be someone who lives with fire, but doesn't burn others with it. You want stability. Be someone whose emotions aren't a storm, just the steady wind beneath their own wings. This is Stoic love, and it begins with 8 timeless principles, ancient, yes, but more relevant now than ever. 8 ways to stop chasing attention and start radiating presence. 8 ways to stop losing sleep over someone's silence and start sleeping peacefully knowing your worth doesn't depend on it. 8 ways to stop falling in love with potential and start connecting with people who actually show up. Because the strongest love isn't the one that demands, it's the one that understands. It's not the love that says, "You complete me." It's the one that says, "I am whole, and I choose you." Not from lack, but from strength. And let me be even more real with you. This kind of love is rare. Not because it's impossible, but because it requires work on yourself. It means being brutally honest with your fears, owning your insecurities without being enslaved by them, showing up consistently, not just when it's convenient. It means understanding that your partner isn't here to fix your wounds, but to walk beside you as you heal them yourself. Stoic love doesn't avoid emotion, it elevates it, because when you truly know yourself, you don't just attract love, you elevate its quality. You draw in those who see you, not the mask you wear. You stop being haunted by "what if" and start trusting in "what is," because you finally learned to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. You've learned to speak when it matters and stay silent when it doesn't. You've learned that being left unread isn't rejection, it's redirection towards something truer. And above all, you've learned that love doesn't need to be loud to be real. It just needs to be anchored in self-respect, in clarity, in calm. So before we dive into these 8 Stoic principles that build attraction and keep love strong, I want you to remember this. You don't need to beg to be seen. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to chase to be loved. You simply need to become someone who lives with such integrity such quiet confidence, such emotional intelligence, that the right person doesn't feel like an achievement. They feel like a reflection, a mirror, of everything you've built within. That is the magnetic power of Stoic love, and it starts now. There's something unexplainably magnetic about a person who stays calm when everyone else loses control. Not passive, not detached, but calm, focused, grounded, and in love. That calmness doesn't just create peace, it ignites obsession. You see, we live in a world where emotional outbursts are not only accepted, they're expected. We're told to speak our truth, express how we feel, never hold anything in. And while there is truth in emotional expression, there's also an overlooked, misunderstood, and almost mystical power in emotional control. Not suppression, not avoidance, but mastery. Let me explain. Imagine a situation where your partner says something that hurts you, whether it's intentional or careless. The average response, anger, defense, silence as punishment, or emotional withdrawal masked as strength. But a Stoic response, it pauses, it breathes, it observes, and in that pause lies the difference between attraction and repulsion, between a moment that builds connection and a moment that destroys trust. When you choose not to react immediately, you're not just being mature, you're commanding power, because nothing disarms a person more than a lover who doesn't lose their balance when poked. There's a hidden seduction in stability, a mystery in restraint, and for those who understand it, the mind becomes an irresistible force in love. I've lived both sides of this. I've been the person who overreacted, who snapped when I felt disrespected, who raised my voice to feel heard, who cried to be understood, and for a long time, I confused emotional intensity with emotional depth. But let me tell you something most people won't. Losing control feels like honesty in the moment, but later, it just feels like regret. Because what you say in a storm often becomes the debris you have to clean up after. And eventually, your relationship becomes a battlefield, not a refuge. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine being the person who listens deeply before speaking, who sees the emotion, but doesn't become it, who can say, "I hear you," even when your blood is boiling. That's not weakness, that's strength in its most rare, most potent form, and the truth, most people have never experienced it. That's why it stands out so dramatically. That's why calmness becomes addictive, because it makes others feel safe in a world where everything else is reactive, volatile, temporary. So, why does calmness spark obsession? Because calmness implies control, and control implies confidence, and confidence, not arrogance, not performance, is what people crave the most, especially in love. When you're calm, people wonder what you know that they don't. When you're calm, people lean in, not just physically, but emotionally. When you're calm, you shift the power dynamics, not in a manipulative way, but in an anchoring way. You're not unbothered because you're numb. You're unbothered because you're trained. And here's where it becomes deeply personal for me. I used to think being emotionally open meant pouring myself out completely. Whenever I felt anything, I thought being vulnerable meant crying when I was hurt, yelling when I was angry, and wearing my feelings like a badge of honor. But Stoicism taught me a higher form of vulnerability, one that says, asterisk, I will feel it fully, but I will not be ruled by it. I started journaling before reacting. I practiced pausing before texting back. I learned to sit with my discomfort, not escape it. And slowly, my relationships changed. People began respecting me more. Not because I demanded it, but because I stopped over-explaining myself. I stopped arguing to prove my worth. I stopped chasing closure and started offering clarity, calm, firm, intentional clarity. And here's something that will change your life if you internalize it. When you control your mind, you control the temperature of every room you enter. Asterisk. In love, this is everything. Your partner will test your limits, sometimes without meaning to. Life will throw curveballs. Your buttons will be pushed. And how you respond, not just once, but consistently, will determine the emotional climate of your relationship. Do you escalate conflict or dissolve it? Do you let your triggers define your tone? Or do you anchor your response in principle? Let me be blunt. Attraction is easy, but keeping respect is what maintains love. And nothing earns respect faster than someone who doesn't flinch under emotional pressure. So how do you get there? How do you build the kind of mind that becomes irresistible? Through daily practice of self-mastery. Not just when it's convenient, not just when you're in a good mood, but every single day, in the smallest, quietest moments. It starts with how you speak to yourself. When something upsets you, do you spiral, or do you breathe, label it, and reframe it? It continues with how you manage your energy. Do you pour your frustration into your partner, or do you learn to transmute it into action? Discipline, creativity, it evolves through the habits you reinforce. Do you wake up and reach for your phone, or do you sit in stillness and remind yourself who you are? And most importantly, it flourishes in your ability to delay reaction. That 5 seconds before you raise your voice. That one breath before you send that angry message. That one moment where you ask yourself, is this helping or hurting what I truly want? This isn't easy, but it's liberating, because once you master your reactions, you stop being controlled by everyone else's actions, and your partner feels it. They don't just hear your words, they feel your calm as an invitation to be real, to let go of drama, to meet you where peace begins. And if they can't meet you there, you'll still stand, because you're not negotiating your emotional safety for temporary affection. This is where love becomes sacred, because it's no longer a transaction of moods, it's a dance of awareness. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. You set the tone, you lead with poise, and in doing so, you become unforgettable. Let's be honest, most people are exhausting to love, not because they're bad people, but because they haven't mastered themselves. They overanalyze, they assume, they lash out, they apologize without change, they love from fear instead of stability. But you can choose differently. You can choose to be the kind of person who doesn't drain their partner, but restores them. Who doesn't create fires, but carries water. And the best part, you don't need to announce it. Your calm will speak louder than your defense ever could. Let me leave you with one more personal truth. Every time I chose peace over pettiness, I felt powerful, not because I won, but because I didn't lose myself. Every time I waited an hour to respond instead of reacting in rage, I gave my future self a gift. Every time I said, "Let me sit with this and get back to you," I opened a door to connection instead of conflict. And love, true, lasting love, was able to walk through that door. So don't underestimate the daily rituals, the journaling, the walks in silence, the mental notes, the deep breaths, the reminder that you don't need to match chaos with chaos. This is the art of becoming irresistible, not through charm or chase, but through clarity and calm. And once you master it, you'll realize the greatest seduction isn't in words or touch. It's in presence, a presence rooted in self-respect, a presence that makes others feel safe, a presence that says, "You can rise or fall around me, but I will remain still." That stillness, that inner silence, that unshakable mind, that's not just stoic, that's legendary. In a world obsessed with image, where filters are worshipped and perfection is staged, the rarest kind of beauty isn't the one you see, it's the one you feel. It doesn't flash across a screen or demand a double tap. It lingers, it resonates, it draws people in without trying, and it stays with them long after the conversation ends. That kind of beauty doesn't come from bone structure or jawlines. It comes from character, because here's the hard truth most people miss. Appearances may attract glances, but virtues attract souls. You want to be magnetic? Start with the things no one can see in a mirror. Start with honesty, courage, justice, moderation, gratitude, not the traits you post in a caption, but the ones you embody when no one's watching. Let's start with honesty, not the watered-down version that means, "I don't lie." I'm talking about radical honesty, the kind that tells the truth even when it's inconvenient, even when it risks rejection, the kind of honesty that says, "Here's what I feel, here's what I fear, here's what I need," and then lets the chips fall where they may. Most people can't do that. They lie to be liked. They edit their personalities like highlight reels. But when you meet someone honest, truly honest, it cuts through the noise like a blade through fog. You feel safe, because you know what they show you is real. That's magnetic. Now courage. This one's different. Courage isn't just doing something bold. It's being vulnerable when it would be easier to hide. It's staying when it would be easier to run. It's having the strength to say no when everything in you wants to please. I used to think courage was only for battlefields or grand decisions. But I've learned the most powerful courage happens in quiet places. Saying, "I was wrong." Saying, "I don't know." Saying, "I care," even if you don't feel the same. That kind of courage, it creates gravity. You feel it, others feel it, and without even trying, people are drawn to it. Because courage gives permission. It creates emotional safety, and emotional safety is one of the deepest forms of attraction. Then comes justice, but not the courtroom kind. The everyday kind, doing the right thing even when it costs you. Not gossiping when everyone else is. Standing up for someone when it's unpopular. Refusing to benefit from someone else's silence. This one is rare, very rare, because justice requires sacrifice, and sacrifice is uncomfortable. But the person who is just, who moves through the world with a moral compass that doesn't shift with convenience, becomes a lighthouse in a storm. People gravitate toward them, not because they're perfect, but because they're consistent, because they make you want to be better just by being near them. Now moderation. That's a word people don't find sexy, but they should. Moderation is power held with grace. It's knowing when enough is enough. It's restraint, not out of fear, but out of principle. In love, moderation is the difference between obsession and intimacy, between control and connection. The person who doesn't need constant attention, who knows how to give space without creating distance. That's the person people crave. Because here's the paradox. The less you need someone to need you, the more attractive you become. I learned this the hard way. I've been the person who gave too much, too fast, who answered every text immediately, who filled every silence with noise. I thought I was being attentive, loving, available, but I wasn't giving love. I was demanding reassurance, and it pushed people away. Moderation, in emotion, in affection, in pursuit. It creates room to breathe, and love needs oxygen. Then there's gratitude, simple, right, but overlooked. The person who is grateful, truly grateful, is radiant, because they see beauty where others complain. They appreciate small things. They don't carry entitlement, and that energy, it's infectious. Gratitude turns presence into warmth. It transforms mundane moments into magic. It shifts the vibe of a room without saying a word. I remember once, during a low point in my life, I met someone who simply said, "I'm just so thankful I got to talk with you today." That was it. No flirtation, no performance, just sincere appreciation. And I remember thinking, I want more people like this in my life. Not because of what they had, but because of how they felt to be around. That's what these virtues do. They turn you into someone people want to sit next to without knowing why. Someone they trust with their silence. Someone who makes them feel seen without being stared at. And let me be real with you. This kind of magnetism isn't loud. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't chase. It doesn't need validation. It just is. It's the quiet presence in a room full of noise. The calm energy that anchors others without effort. The authenticity that calls to others like a whisper through chaos. And here's the kicker. You don't need to try to be magnetic. You just need to become who you respect. When you live in integrity, when your actions and values align, you begin to carry an energy that speaks louder than words. You become someone others remember, someone they admire, even if they can't explain why. Because character is rare, and what's rare, that's what people can't stop thinking about. Think about the people who've moved you, who've left a mark. It wasn't their clothes, their car, their job. It was how they carried themselves, how they made you feel, what they stood for, how they responded under pressure. It was their virtue, and that's the beauty of all this. You don't need a perfect past. You don't need the best genetics or the smoothest voice. You don't need to be famous or followable or flawless. You just need to choose, every day, to lead with your principles. To be honest, even when it costs you. To be courageous, even when you shake. To be just, even when no one will clap for it. To be moderate, even when excess is tempting. To be grateful, even when it's easier to complain. These things, they don't just make you attractive, they make you unforgettable, because in a world where most people are trying to be impressive, you'll be something better, authentic, and authenticity. That's the kind of beauty that doesn't age. It deepens, it evolves, it pulls others in, not to admire you, but to join you, to rise with you, and as you grow into this version of yourself, as you embody these magnetic virtues, not only will you attract love, you'll attract the right kind of love. The kind that stays, the kind that builds, the kind that doesn't just see your light, but protects it, because ultimately, love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about being someone who doesn't need to be completed, so you can meet others with fullness, not lack. And when you show up full of honesty, courage, justice, moderation, and gratitude, you stop needing to be desired. You become desired, without effort, without strategy, without scripts, just presence, just virtue, just you. And that is what makes you magnetic. And once you understand that, truly feel it in your bones, that you are your own sanctuary, your own source of meaning, everything else begins to shift. The way you walk into a room changes. The way you speak softens but carries more weight. The way you respond to silence, to rejection, to space, it all transforms. Because you're no longer fighting to hold someone close. You're standing firmly in your center, letting what's meant for you arrive with ease, and letting what isn't pass without panic. People can feel when you're self-sufficient. It's not arrogance, it's not aloofness, it's not pride, it's presence. It's the way you don't flinch when plans fall through. It's the way you enjoy your own company, not out of bitterness, but out of wholeness. It's the way you love without grasping, support without losing yourself, and give without expecting someone else to complete you. And I'll be honest, getting here isn't easy. We're conditioned from a young age to believe that love must hurt, that it must consume us, that if it's not dramatic, it's not real. But that's a lie. Real love, healthy love, is rooted in balance. And balance can only exist when each person knows how to stand on their own. I remember the first time I went on a solo trip after ending a relationship. I didn't do it to run away or to prove something. I did it because I needed to remember who I was without the echo of someone else's needs defining me. The first night was hard, quiet in a way that felt deafening. But then something beautiful happened. I started noticing things I'd forgotten to care about. The colors of the sunset, the weight of a good book in my hands, the peace of waking up to silence and not feeling lonely, but free. That was the moment I realized the strongest relationships are built by people who know how to be alone and aren't afraid of it. Because when you're not afraid of solitude, you don't cling out of fear. You don't tolerate emotional chaos just to avoid silence. You don't confuse attachment with connection. You love from clarity, not from compulsion. And that kind of love, it changes lives. Imagine two people, each rooted deeply in their own passions, their own values, their own joy. They come together not to fill each other up, but to share what's already full. They support without smothering. They listen without needing to fix. They celebrate without competition. That kind of love, it's not fantasy. It's possible, but it starts with you. You have to ask yourself, who am I when no one's looking? What lights me up when no one else is clapping? What kind of life am I building for myself? Not for anyone else to admire, but for me to feel proud of. And if you don't like the answers, good. That means you're awake. It means you're ready to reclaim your space, your voice, your independence. You don't need to abandon love to become self-sufficient. You just need to stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of it. You get to want love. You get to crave closeness. But you don't need to lose your identity in order to keep someone interested. In fact, the more you become yourself, fully, unapologetically, the more attractive you become. Because people aren't drawn to desperation. They're drawn to depth, to someone who can hold space, who can offer calm, who can stand firm when emotions rise. You become the storm and the stillness, the fire and the foundation. And here's something else I've learned. Boundaries aren't just rules. They're love letters to yourself. They say, I've worked too hard to build this version of me. I won't dismantle it for temporary affection. They say, I choose peace over drama, clarity over confusion, and truth over comfort. And when you live by those principles, you start attracting people who live the same way. Not perfect people, but people who've done their own inner work. People who know how to hold space for your independence instead of feeling threatened by it. People who can witness your strength without trying to compete with it. That's when love becomes a collaboration, not a correction. That's when you stop performing. You just be. You speak without filter, but with care. You rest without guilt. You love without fear of being left, because even if you are, you know how to hold yourself. You know how to rebuild. You've done it before. So if you're still struggling, still clinging, still aching in spaces that don't feel reciprocal, pause. Take a breath, and ask yourself, what would it look like to return to me? Not to give up on love, but to stop depending on it for my worth. Start small. Take yourself on walks with no destination. Create something just for the joy of it. Sit in silence and let your feelings rise, without chasing them away. Set a boundary this week and honor it, even if your voice shakes. Say no to something that drains you. Say yes to something that's just for you. These are the seeds of self-sufficiency, and over time, they blossom into confidence, into wholeness, into magnetism, and when love arrives, And it won't feel like a rescue mission. It'll feel like a reunion. Two sovereign souls, two full lives, two quiet fires, meeting, not to become one flame, but to burn brighter together. That's what I want for you. That's what I've chosen for me. A love that begins from fullness, not fear. A connection that thrives in freedom, not possession. A bond that celebrates individuality, not demands its sacrifice. That is self-sufficiency. That is depth. That is the kind of love that not only lasts, but liberates. True acceptance isn't passive. It's not about tolerating flaws in silence or pretending to be okay with things that hurt you. It's not indifference. It's not surrender. True acceptance is an act of radical presence. It says, I see you exactly as you are, and I choose to stay in the moment with that reality, without trying to fix it, without forcing it to become something else just to make me comfortable. And in love, this kind of acceptance can be nothing short of transformative, because we all crave something deeper than admiration. We crave being seen in our raw, messy, unpolished humanness, and still being loved, not despite our imperfections, but with them. Not because we hide the difficult parts of ourselves, but because someone looks us in the eye, sees all of it, and says, you don't have to earn my love by becoming someone else. I used to believe love was about improvement, about helping each other be better, about growing each other up, about sculpting someone into the version you imagined when you first fell for their potential. But all that did was leave both of us feeling like projects instead of people. The more I tried to encourage change, the more I created pressure, the more I wanted someone to grow, the more I made them feel like they weren't enough. And here's the paradox. The more I accepted someone as they were, the more they changed, naturally, willingly, beautifully. Acceptance doesn't mean agreeing with every action or giving up your standards. It means creating a space where someone feels safe enough to want to grow. Not because they're afraid of losing you, but because they feel so held, so respected, so loved, that growth becomes their own desire, not a requirement. This is what we miss in relationships. We think people change when we push harder, when we explain more, when we criticize gently or manipulate kindly. But real change, the kind that sticks, only happens when someone feels deeply, unconditionally seen, when they feel like they don't have to perform to be worthy, when they know that even in their struggle, they're not too much, they're not broken, they're not a problem to solve. And let's be honest, it's not easy. Accepting someone doesn't mean you never feel frustration. It doesn't mean you stay in harmful dynamics. It means that within the bounds of your own self-respect, you choose to love without control. You love without writing a secret script and expecting them to follow it. You let them breathe, and in that breath, so much transformation happens. I've been on both ends. I've been the one who felt judged by someone who claimed to love me. Their love came with invisible terms and conditions. I always felt like I was one mistake away from being too much, from being abandoned, from being reminded that you just need to change this one thing. That kind of love breaks you quietly. It makes you question your worth. It turns love into an exam you're always failing. But I've also been on the receiving end of true acceptance, and I'll never forget it. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was in the small things. In the way they didn't flinch when I cried. In the way they didn't rush to give advice when I confessed something hard. In the way they just sat with me and said, "I'm here. You don't have to be different for me to stay." That changed me, not because they demanded I become better, but because they created a space where I finally wanted to. That's the power of acceptance. It invites growth by removing shame. Because when someone is constantly trying to improve us, we may comply, but we never feel loved. And when we don't feel loved, we don't feel safe. And when we don't feel safe, we don't change, we hide. So if you want to inspire someone to rise, start by sitting with them exactly where they are. Start by saying, "You don't have to change today. You're enough right now," and mean it. Because that's when trust is born. And trust is the soil where growth takes root. Acceptance isn't weakness, it's not settling, it's strength wrapped in gentleness. It's a calm refusal to let love become a performance. It doesn't mean enabling behavior that harms you. It means holding your boundaries with kindness. It means saying, "This isn't okay for me," without making them feel like a failure. It's separating behavior from identity. It's believing someone can grow without demanding they be perfect today. And the magic, the moment someone feels accepted, they begin to soften, the tension in their shoulders drops, the edge in their voice disappears. They feel safe, and safety is where healing begins. You want a love that lasts. Don't just fall for who someone could be. Stay for who they are, even as they're becoming. Show them they don't have to shrink to keep your love. Let them expand, because nothing feels more powerful than being loved in your becoming. Nothing builds loyalty like knowing someone sees your darkness and stays, not to rescue you, but to witness your return to the light. So love without a stopwatch, without a checklist, without turning someone's growth into a race. And in return, you'll often witness a transformation deeper than you could have imagined. Not because you forced it, but because you trusted it. Real love isn't about gripping tightly. It's about learning how to hold someone without closing your fist. And nowhere is this truth more alive than in the Stoic concept of paradoxical detachment. The art of loving deeply without trying to own, of connecting without clinging, of being all in while still being free. Because the moment you try to possess love, you poison it, you replace choice with control, affection with anxiety, connection with chains, and what once felt sacred begins to suffocate. We're conditioned to believe that love means holding on, that to prove we care, we must attach, but in doing so, we often strangle the very thing we cherish. We forget that intimacy cannot be forced, that love, when real, chooses to stay, and that any love built on fear of loss, fear of change, fear of not being enough, isn't love. It's possession dressed up as devotion. Letting go of control doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop fearing. I had to learn this the hard way. In my past, I equated love with presence. I believed if someone loved me, they had to answer fast, show up often, think of me first. I wanted consistency, but what I really demanded, if I'm honest, was control. I didn't realize that real love isn't measured by response time. It's measured by trust, and when you need constant reassurance, it's not love you're missing, it's security in yourself. That's why Stoicism changed everything for me. The Stoics taught that we don't own anything, not even the people we cherish most. Epictetus wrote, "Never say about anything, 'I have lost it,' but only, 'I have returned it.'" The idea sounds brutal at first, but it's liberating, because it reminds us that love, at its highest form, is not about possession, it's about presence. It's about walking beside someone, not dragging them along. It's about witnessing, not owning, holding space, not holding hostage. Imagine a relationship where both people are free to walk away, but choose to stay. Not out of guilt, not out of habit, not out of fear, but out of alignment, out of love. That kind of relationship feels different. It breathes, it moves, it grows. But to create that, you have to let go of the illusion of control. You have to stop managing your partner's reactions. Stop trying to preempt every possible threat. Stop turning love into a surveillance project. Because the truth is, no matter how much you watch, you cannot stop someone from leaving. And if your love depends on never being left, then it's not love, it's a negotiation. Real intimacy requires risk. It requires you to love without guarantees. And that's terrifying, I know, but it's also where the magic is. Because when you stop trying to keep someone, you finally become someone worth staying with. You become grounded, calm, clear. You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't manipulate, you simply love, and you let that love speak for itself. And if it's returned, beautiful. If it's not, you're still whole. That's paradoxical detachment, loving with your entire heart, but not tying your identity to the outcome. Showing up fully, while knowing you can survive without them. This is not detachment in the cold, aloof sense. It's not withdrawal. It's not emotional distance. It's presence without ownership. It's saying, "I love you, and you are free. You don't owe me anything for that love. But if you choose to stay, let it be because it's your desire, not your duty." And the irony, that freedom creates the deepest kind of intimacy. When you don't feel caged, you lean in more. When you're not being watched, you show your real self. When you're trusted, you feel safe enough to be vulnerable. This kind of love is rare because it requires a strong sense of self. You have to know that you'll be okay, even if they walk away. You have to know your peace isn't held hostage by their presence. You have to be able to say, "I love you, but I will not lose myself to keep you." That doesn't mean being indifferent. It means being anchored. I used to think if I loved someone enough, I could keep them close. That if I said all the right things, gave them everything they needed, became their perfect partner, they would never leave. But here's the truth. People don't stay because of how tightly you hold. They stay because of how deeply they feel free in your presence. And that freedom isn't passive, it's courageous. Because it takes strength to say, "You're not mine, you are with me, but you are not my possession. I will not reduce you to a role, a label, a checkbox on my identity." That's not detachment in the sense of not caring. That's detachment in the sense of deep respect. It's letting someone change, letting them grow, letting them go through phases and seasons and still saying, "I'm here, I see you, and I don't need you to be the same person you were yesterday to deserve my love today." This kind of love requires trust in life, not just in them. It requires believing that whatever comes, joy or heartbreak, you will remain grounded. Because your worth is not up for negotiation, because you are not defined by who stays or who leaves, because love is something you give, not something you try to trap. And when you live this way, your relationships shift. You no longer grip the moment, so the moment lasts longer. You no longer demand consistency, so people show up more freely. You no longer fear losing love, so you love more fully. And yes, sometimes people will walk away, but they won't take your peace with them, because your peace was never in their hands to begin with. There's a moment in every relationship where you realize that love alone isn't enough. That no matter how strong the connection, how deep the affection, what truly determines the future isn't just how much you love someone, it's how wisely you choose to love them. That's where Stoic wisdom becomes more than a philosophy. It becomes a compass. A way to navigate the storms without sinking the ship. A way to evolve instead of explode. Because let's be honest, most of us were never taught how to fight without destroying. How to stay without controlling. How to love someone as they are, not as we wish they would be. We confuse compromise with losing. We confuse calm with apathy. We confuse silence with punishment, and in that confusion, we create chaos where there could have been clarity. But the Stoics teach something different, something powerful. They teach that the wise person chooses their battles carefully, not out of fear or weakness, but out of strength, because not every hill is worth dying on. Not every disagreement deserves escalation, and not every trigger is a truth. I used to think being in love meant speaking up about everything. Every annoyance, every unmet need, every moment I felt slightly off. I thought transparency meant total exposure. That if I didn't air every emotion, I wasn't being authentic. But I've learned that wisdom isn't about saying everything you think. It's about knowing when your thoughts are worth voicing, and when they're just passing storms. And more importantly, whether your intention is to heal or just to be heard. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let the small stuff pass through you without reaction. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it doesn't matter enough to damage the foundation you're trying to build. Because the truth is, so many of the arguments we have aren't about the actual moment. They're about patterns, and if we don't pause, if we don't look deeper, we end up treating symptoms instead of the root. That's why blame is so seductive. It gives us a villain, a target, a simple answer, but most of the time, Blame is just pain in disguise. It's the easier route, the louder one, the one that says, "This is your fault," instead of asking, "What's really going on underneath?" Stoic love doesn't rush to blame. It observes, it reflects, it holds space for truth without needing to assign guilt. It asks questions like, is this a moment of miscommunication? Or is this a pattern of disrespect? Is this something temporary, or something structural? Is this my pain talking, or my wisdom? That kind of love is rare, because it requires emotional maturity, the ability to hold duality. To say, "I am hurt right now, but I can still choose not to hurt you back." To say, "This is frustrating, but it doesn't define everything between us." To say, "I see a flaw, but I still see the full person behind it." Because when you love wisely, you stop trying to win, and you start trying to understand. And that shift, that one internal pivot, changes everything. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop turning every disagreement into a declaration. You start listening to understand, not to reload. You stop building a case and start building a bridge. But here's the hardest part. Wise love isn't just about how you treat the other person. It's about how honestly you look at yourself, your patterns, your expectations, your ideals. Because sometimes we're not arguing with our partner. We're arguing with the idea of who we think they should be. We fall in love with potential, with imagined versions, and when the real person starts showing up, flawed, human, evolving, we panic, we grieve the illusion, we try to drag them back into the mold we built for them. That's not love, that's attachment to a fantasy. Real love, Stoic love, says, "I will not punish you for being human. I will not withhold affection every time you disappoint the version of you I created in my mind. I will not make you earn safety by meeting an invisible standard." Instead, it says, "I love you for who you are, and I'm here, not just when you're easy to love, but especially when you're not." That doesn't mean tolerating harm. Stoicism is never about passivity. It's about clarity. It's about learning to see people as they are, and choosing your response with intention. It means creating space for growth without demanding perfection. It means letting your partner evolve without feeling threatened. It means recognizing that love is a living thing, and if it's not allowed to grow, it starts to die, and growth is messy. It means unlearning habits. It means navigating changes. It means loving someone through transitions without expecting them to always have it together. That's why wisdom in love is so vital, because only with wisdom can we hold both accountability and compassion. Only with wisdom can we create safety and still set boundaries. Only with wisdom can we love fully without losing ourselves in the process. I used to believe that love was about intensity, fireworks, drama, that if we weren't arguing, we weren't passionate, that if we weren't hurting, we weren't real. But now, I believe the strongest love is the kind that grows quieter with time, not because it's fading, but because it's deepening. It's the love that doesn't need to shout to feel real. The love that doesn't need constant proving. The love that says, I'm with you, still, always, and we're evolving, together. That's the Stoic path, a path where love becomes less about ownership, and more about understanding, less about control, and more about curiosity, less about winning, and more about witnessing. Because when you choose love with wisdom, you don't just survive the storms. You learn how to dance in the rain, together, again and again. When you begin living by the principles of Stoicism, not as quotes to post, but as truths to embody, something shifts, quietly, steadily, and then all at once. You stop chasing love like a prize to win. You stop begging for affection, twisting yourself to be chosen, shrinking to be accepted, and instead, you become someone who attracts love, not through effort, but through essence, not through gains, but through groundedness, because the greatest paradox of all is this: the more you focus on becoming whole within, the more the right people find their way to you. You don't need to scream to be seen. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth. Your presence becomes the proof, and your calm becomes the invitation. Through honesty, courage, presence, gratitude, discipline, self-sufficiency, and acceptance, you evolve into a version of yourself that doesn't just hope for real love. You radiate it. You walk with integrity. You speak with clarity. You hold space with strength. And in doing so, you send out a signal, not of need, but of alignment. And those who are meant for you, they'll feel it. Because love born from virtue doesn't just burn bright, it burns clean. It doesn't demand attention, it commands respect. It's not built on possession, but on peace. It isn't swayed by mood swings or insecurity. It's rooted in character, in you. And when you love like this, when you live like this, you don't just attract love, you inspire it. So if you've made it this far, let me say this plainly: you are not too much, you are not behind, and you are not broken. You're building. Every boundary you've set, every time you've chosen growth over comfort, every small act of emotional discipline, it's adding up. It's changing you. Quietly, powerfully, and one day, you'll look back and realize, you didn't find love by searching outward. You found it by coming home to yourself. That is the Stoic path, not away from emotion, but toward meaning, not away from connection, but toward clarity. So if this resonated, if something inside you stirred, if you're choosing to live and love a little differently starting today, comment * Stoic gratitude * below. Because this isn't just a video, it's a vow to love wisely, to live deeply, and to become a magnet for the kind of love that lasts.